is Dr. William Boyd, known as Nick of the Dubbing Teasers. Today, I'm going to be tying what is called a dragon, and it's basically a dragonfly imitation with a little bit of spice, I guess you could say. This is considered primarily a warm water type of fly for bass or crappie or brim, perch, things like that. But I have caught trout on it before as well. It's a subsurface fly. I'm going to start out with a size 8 mustad streamer hook. You can see it there. I'm going to get started by putting it in the vise. And get it in there anchored really well. I'm going to be using black thread. And you can do this fly in a variety of color combinations. I'm going to be tying my favorite as far as what I've found catches the most fish. And it's basically black with gold eyes and a grizzly collar, grizzly hackle collar, and then basically very bright fluorescent yellow legs. So we're going to start by laying down a thread base here. Go all to the way to the bend of the hook. And really you can use, this is kind of like scrap material right here, but that'll make a good tail. I always like to have a fairly bushy tail, so I'm going to strip this stuff right here. You can see that, and make for a bushy tail out of this. You want something to give it some action where it's kind of waving in the water, and that part of the henback feather serves that purpose really well. It's nice and fluffy. I'll get it anchored in there. Okay. Now, next thing is I'm going to use black chenille. And I usually use a medium chenille. You can use fine or small, but it'll require more thread wraps if you do that, or more wraps of the chenille. You could also use large or like considered fuzzy. Just depends. I like to use the medium. I'm going to go all the way up. I've anchored my chenille in. So now what I'm going to do, just so I can make sure the proportions are right, this is very cheap material. It's the chain for having a chain pull on your fan or your ceiling fan or light. And what I'll do is I'll take 2 of these, keep them together, but I need to separate 2 of them. So I'll do that right here. And you can see, try to hold it here where you can see it, that I've got 2 of these. Now this, one of the valuable aspects of this, let me get it anchored, and that way you'll be able to really see it. One of the valuable aspects of this, besides the fact that this stuff is very, very inexpensive, and as you can see by that chain link, I can tie dozens of flies with just that. The weight of it is such that when you cast the fly, it goes in the water and sinks at a slow rate because it's not heavily weighted, and oftentimes you'll get strikes from the fish as it's actually sinking down in the water. I've had that happen many, many times. And that's kind of a fun experience, especially for a child who thinks they're going to have to wait a while, and the next thing you know, they've got a bite on. Now I'm going to do some figure 8s here to get this thing anchored in the right position. It's tilted a little bit, but I'm going to try to bring it back with a few more strong thread wraps. Then what I like to do is go under 10 times. I just found 10 works well. I'm just actually going under both of the bead parts. I'm not going over top of it at all. I don't know if that's 10. I got counting and I got talking and not counting. But that should be sufficient. Now I'm going to do some this way, some the other way. And now I'm going to wrap it all the way up to the head. Now, right now, this is feeling firm, although it's moving some. See, you can see where I've tilted it. So in order to keep that from happening, because that problem gets worse if the fly gets wet, what I like to use is this UV glue. And I'm using this Loon UV Clear finish. It's the thick version. And I put just a little bit on the top part of the fly right here. Let that sink in, and then do some on the underneath part. This will keep it from twirling, because if it twirls, it creates a nuisance for sure. At this point, then I will use my UV light, and you can see where I'm letting this cure. This actually forces it to cure. In fact, if you're a tyer out there, I was warned by a fellow tyer that you don't want to use this UV glue if you're doing some kind of demonstration outside, because the sunlight, you don't need the light. It will actually cure the glue instantly, and it's actually a problem. So anyway, I'm curing this, and once you do this, and we'll have a few more thread wraps later on, but those eyes are not going to spin. So there you go. That should be, I'm going to touch it to make sure, but yeah, it's dried, and it's not tacky or anything. Now, I'm going to move my thread back to just behind the eye. A couple thread wraps. I'm going to do a quick half hitch so it doesn't unravel at all. And at this point, I'm going to move my chenille up the shank of the hook toward the eyes. I'm going to stop just shy of the eyes to allow me a little bit of room for some hackle. One more of those, okay. So you can see what we got there. That's shaping up to be a really nice looking fly. And like here again, I like flies that are really going to catch fish, especially if I'm going to take the time to tie them. And this, I've helped many a child over the years catch their first fish on a fly rod using this fly. So anyway, I'm sold on it. We cut that off, and now I'm going to take, this is some hackle. This is a grizzly hackle. And I'm going to tie this in right here like so. Anchor it in. I'm going to end it with a half hitch just to make sure we're good. And I'll get my hackle pliers. And I want to make this a little bit robust. I want it just because it stands out in the water more. So I'm going to do a number of rotations to make sure that the fish can actually see this part of it. So you can see there, that's fairly fuzzy. We'll do one more. And I'm going to put the thread behind it. Another couple to make sure I don't mess up on camera. Nothing worse than that, right? I'm going to turn it upwards so that I can cut. That's another little technique you can do. If you do all your cuts by pulling it up and the thread's down, you have a much less of a risk of cutting your thread. I've taught my granddaughter that, and she really rarely makes a mistake with it. Now what I'm going to do this time, since since this is a little further back, I'm going to get my long reach hackle pliers. You can see the difference here in the two hackle pliers. And I'm going to do my whip finish. They're not hackle pliers, I meant whip finish tools. The long reach whip finish tools. And I can reach behind the eyes there and do my whip finish, and then tie it off right like that. So we're good. We're almost done with the fly. Now you could fish this fly as is, but notice what it looks like right now, and now in a moment, notice what it's going to look like in the end, the final product. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to do it, place it just a little bit behind the hackle itself, that grizzly hackle. Cut the excess off here. And now this are some legs. I've actually cut them to length already to just make it easier for me. I finally learned if I cut them the right length to begin with, when I get them on here, I don't have to trim so much to make them the right length. And I'm going to take my bodkin, and you can see how I'm peeling that off. We'll put it down here. We're going to need 2 of these. You can use more than 2, but 2 usually does the trick pretty well. And what I like to do is actually place these on top, because I can position them. So where I'm going to take my hand and do one loose wrap to get it positioned, and I'll take my fingers here and pull this up. Now, that's only one wrap, see? So I'm going to do several to keep it more firmly in place. Now I'm going to flip it around. I can adjust this to make them a little more equal. Flip it around and do the second set of legs. I'm going to do 2 wraps there and adjust it. That's looking really well. We'll do several wraps. And now, again, I'm going to use the extended reach whip finish tool to reach beyond those legs and the hackle to get my whip finish knot finalized. Do that. And you can see, if you recall what it looked like without the legs, this just is more striking. It kind of pops. And if you feel like it pops, then remember the fish are going to think it pops too. And this is just really a good warm water fly. Like I said, I've caught trout on it as well, but this is a go-to pattern for me. It's just called the Dragon. Like I said before, you could do it with a white chenille. Olive is really, really good. I've done it in brown and different colored eyes. I've got some that are black eyes, some silver. And it just depends on what kind of chain you can find at your local hardware store, I guess. But there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video.